Week 19 Viva. How did the medieval university emerge as a powerful force in society? Although we are all familiar with the systems of higher education, we often don't realize how transformative they were. Developed from religious educational institutions, the university system emerged as a powerful force due to its secular ability to unite a highly divided continent. First, it emerged from a variety of sources to become a central institution in medieval Europe. Second, it established a uniform system of academic credentials which allowed for a pan-European intellectual culture. And thirdly, it spread due to the enormous economic and political developments it created. My first point is that the medieval university emerged from a wide variety of sources to become a central institution in medieval Europe. As it happens, university education shares a three-phase process with the medieval system of apprenticeship. In the guild system, to join a guild, a young man would have to undergo a three-step process. First becoming an apprentice, then a journeyman, and then a master. In the academic system, a similar three-step process emerged, that of the bachelor, the master, and the doctor. The first step in the emergence of the university came during Charlemagne's reign. Although uneducated himself, Charlemagne realized that his empire needed a body of educated people if it was to survive. He turned to the church as the source, and he decreed that every monastery and cathedral should establish a school and provide free education for any boy who was eager to learn. The aim was to create a large body of educated priests who could lead the empire. However, Charlemagne died and his empire disintegrated under the constant waves of invasions. Some schools were founded, however, to train priests. The curriculum was rooted in classical study, consisting of the trivium, which is grammar, logic, and rhetoric, and the quadrivium, which was arithmetic, geometry, astronomy, and music. Just like trivium and quadrivium, most other words used in the university setting are rooted in Latin, which would include campus, tuition, lecture, student, junior, senior, the word goes on and on. According to Lynn Harry Nelson, quote, "Students at a university are part of a great tradition," unquote. Eventually, the curriculum at such schools began to develop and become more specialized, with different schools developing in different directions. In 1079, Pope Gregory VII issued a papal decree ordering that all cathedrals and major universities were to establish schools for the training of clergy. This resulted in a great expansion of education. Some places with a great number of monasteries became centers of education. For instance, Paris, where the Cathedral School of Notre Dame emerged as the greatest of medieval universities. My second point is that the medieval university established a uniform system of academic credentials which allowed for a pan-European intellectual culture. In the medieval system, learning was rooted in a very different model than it is today. The primary method of learning was called marginalia, which means during a class, the students would copy out the chapter of the textbook that their professor had chosen to read for them. During the lecture, afterwards, they would write relevant notes and commentary in the space left in the wide margins on the edge of the page. Once the students felt that they had learned enough, they could appear before the chancellor to be examined. If they succeeded in answering all of the chancellor's questions, they were given a diploma. Once educational specialization had emerged in Europe, universities began to draw students from across the continent. According to Harold Berman, quote, the establishment of a uniform class of university-educated scholars helped European leaders to solve disputes that existed between various jurisdictions, unquote. Universities brought intellectual flourishing, economic stability, and uniformity to Europe. The intermingling of academics from across the continent helped to create an increasingly unified idea of educational experience and achievements. In a typical medieval college student's day, the student would get up at 5 o'clock in the morning. They had chapel at 5:30, then mass at 6 o'clock, where they were all expected to attend. Next, there were a series of classes, which would be a series of lectures, which consisted of a series of lectures and discussions. Dinner was at 12 o'clock, where scripture was read, then a book of the master's choice, and then a passage about a martyr. An hour of recreation was allowed after dinner. The students could converse or walk around inside of the college. Then everyone returned to their own chamber, which I assume they could then study or take a nap because they got up at 5 in the morning. Supper was around 7 o'clock, where there was more reading, and then they had free time until chapel at 8:30. After this, students were expected to study quietly in their chambers or sleep. Officials made frequent inspections of their pupils' quarters before bed to make sure that they were not wandering about the campus. The university system was formed because students could attend any courses they wished to and from any faculty in any school. All that basically mattered was whether or not they could satisfy the chancellor in order to graduate. Popular instructors began to rent halls for their classes. These became the foundation of permanent academic buildings. Students began to move near their favorite professors, and they would share room and board with each other so that it would be cheaper. This created the predecessors of dormitories and dining halls. My third point is that the medieval university spread due to the enormous economic and political developments it created. It improved the economy by the development of the merchant, administrative and civil law, and the staffing of courts. Also, the enforcement of contracts. This all reduced the complexity and uncertainty of doing business, which helped trade and markets to flourish. The economic resurgence led to urbanization and better trade. According to David Catoni, quote, at precisely the time when it experienced its commercial revolution, Europe also saw the creation of the first universities. University graduates created a new class of educated individuals who took leading roles in government, medicine, and the church. These networks of Latin-speaking individuals with shared ideas and experiences helped to create the first bureaucracies in Europe. This class was created by the increased travel of students around Europe, especially after rulers were pushed to establish agreements guaranteeing safe travel for academics. The students who were not studying as natives of their city where they studied were often exposed to many dangers and disadvantages. Their messengers or supplies from home were often robbed, and they were at a great disadvantage in local courts when disputes arose between them and citizens of the city. In 1158, Frederick I, who was the Holy Roman Emperor at the time, granted protection and privilege to all the scholars of his cities, saying that they will have the advantage in legal cases rather than the citizens. Pope Gregory IX also published a statute giving protection and travel rights to students. Finally, the university affected the economy by aiding in the development of legal institutions through the students' education in Roman and canon law that it provided. In conclusion, although we are all familiar with the systems of higher education, we don't often realize how transformative medieval universities were to society. Developed from religious educational institutions, the university system emerged as a powerful force due to its secular ability to unite a highly divided continent. First, it emerged from a variety of sources to become a central institution in medieval Europe. Secondly, it established a uniform system of academic credentials, which allowed for a pan-European intellectual culture. And thirdly, it spread due to the enormous economic and political developments it created. Thank you.